there. The sailors you're going to lead, they won't know if you've been a chief for 1 year, for 5 years, or you just put those brand new store smell anchors on yesterday. Okay, but get out there, do something, ask. We're here to help you form and shape your career so you can get where you need to be successful. I cannot emphasize that enough. Set your own destiny. Do not leave it up to CNRFC to pick a billet for you, and you're going to wind up in like North Dakota or something like that. My 2 cents.
That's appreciated.
Totally agree with Eric on that one. I promoted out of.
Hey Chief, thank you for that real quick. I just want to give a little ad lib real quick. If you're not speaking, make sure that your microphone is on mute, please. Back over to you all.
All right, so I got to agree with Eric on that one. I promoted myself out of a squadron unit that I was in for 13 years as squadron corpsman, made chief. I had to find something. Luckily for me, at a change of command, one of my former skippers was there, was at down at Command Navy Regiment Atlantic. I asked her, hey, you got a job for me? She had me down there the next weekend. You know, she's now an admiral.
Yeah, I wound up at Mizron 14 because I had a former captain and I said, sir, I need a new job. I'm going to be a brand new chief. And he's like, you need to leave the Mizron community and you need to do something else completely out of your realm. And I wound up being the SEL of EMF Bethesda unit. Okay, I'm a yeoman, right? John's a corpsman. He understands what corpsmen need, but I'm a yeoman and I was completely lost. But I took the CO's mission, his action plan, his training plan, and I learned it as chiefing. It's a verb, right? We chief. We don't care what your rating is. You have subject matter expertise in that little area, and that's great. And that will help you promote within your community. But for real, nobody cares. Okay, I can take Chief Townsend here, and he could have gone and been in charge of the galley. And all he has to do is know how to manage sailors to complete whatever that mission is. It doesn't matter that he's a corpsman. It's managing the sailors to do what needs to be done. And if you're going to hang out in the unit where you currently are, if you're able to get a billet, I encourage you to think long and hard about that, because there's a bunch of first classes there that don't like you right now because you promoted and they didn't, right? Are you able to be an effective and impartial leader to those guys that you were first class buddies with yesterday, and now you have to be their chief? I spent the first 5.5 years of my career with the Seabees, and absolutely, when you made chief, they moved you to another unit for at least 1 year so that you were not hanging out with your buddies. They sent you somewhere 100 miles away where nobody knew who you were, so you could learn how to be a leader. And you need to have a real heart-to-heart with your current unit leadership, your other chiefs, significant others. You know, maybe you need to travel. I spent 2 years, I live in Pennsylvania. I've spent time traveling to Atlanta, to Baltimore, to the War College in Rhode Island, to Chicago, Fort Worth, right? Take those tough billets. They're going to set you up for success. So, and my Navy assignment is open right now. If you're not advancing until later on in the fiscal year, you have some time to look around and start making contacts and thinking about it. But as a career counselor, I cannot emphasize enough that you need to set yourself up for success. You have to be able to lead your sailors in a non-compromising environment, and trying to lead your friends that you hung out with yesterday is not going to work. It takes time.
I mean, that's why that skipper brought me down to Norfolk. She wanted me to be a leader. She wanted me to reinstate and reinstill military bearing, because they only had like one other chief there, and a bunch of junior JOs and a bunch of 24 some sailors. And that's what I did for 4 months. Not only did I take care of getting their bearings straight, but I had to check on their stuff that wasn't being done. Like check to make sure that they're ready for advancement. Check their awards in their records and make sure, you know, the NOSC and everybody's putting the right stuff in. That's taking care of your sailors. That's points on, you know, that's points you needed for your advancement. You know, I got a phone call after that. That was driving, you know, going down there, spending ATs as travel, and that way I get down there and you come back. I'm also in PA. Then I got another phone call. Hey, we need you back here to Willow Grove. We want you to do the SEL for the clinic. Roger that. I'll take it. You know, you got to find outside. My last active duty ADSW command was the Naval History and Heritage Command, Echelon 2, safety manager for the entire Navy museums, all of them. I'm a corpsman. That's usually a GS 13-14 job. But that was my job for 2 years. So look outside the realm.
Let's get another selectee to introduce yourself and let us know about you.
I can go next if you'd like. I am GMC Select Chris Kanzler. I live in Ardmore, Alabama, which is on the state line of Alabama and Tennessee. Originally from Nebraska. I've been in the Navy roughly 16 years. I have done 8 years active duty and almost 8 years reserve. My first ship was the USS Theodore Roosevelt, and then from there I transferred to NMC Jacksonville, where I worked in the torpedo IMA shop. From there, I went to the reserves, got stationed with NCHB 11 in the ESC company, working security and tank camp maintenance. Took a career change on my civilian job and moved to Huntsville, Alabama area, where I took a job with Raytheon. And then I transferred from NCHB 11 to NCHB 13 and worked in the cargo handling company side of cargo instead of the ESC side. Got to go on a really cool trip within my first year there. I went down to Antarctica for Operation Deep Freeze. Really enjoyed that. It's probably one of my favorite deployment or tours I did. As I stated, I moved to Alabama for my civilian career. Kind of ties in with the Navy. We build I'm production lead over 5 different programs of Standard Missile, doing different builds and getting them to the Navy for the VLS type. I'm married to my wife, Vanessa, for 13 years. I have 3 boys, Austin, who turns 12 on January 29th, Jackson, who just turned 7 day before Thanksgiving, and Carson, who just turned 4 in August. I enjoy being outdoors, spending time with my kids, playing sports. The older 2 are involved in baseball, basketball. I am football. I help coach the football and baseball team that they play on. And I enjoy being outdoors, hunting. I'm also in school to be a gunsmith. So just a little bit of everything. And sorry I can't have the video feed on right now. I'm actually driving from my house down to Bessemer, Alabama for drill this weekend.
So, Selectee Kanzler, throw a question out for the genuines.
Yeah, I was just going to ask.
What was that question?
Throw out a question for the genuines.
What was your favorite tour that any of you have been on?
I'll take that one since I love history. I love the Navy's history. We're the caretakers in Navy history. My last active duty command. being the safety manager for Naval History and Heritage Command, responsible for the safety of our history. And being able to actually see the stuff on the backside that the general public and some of the Navy doesn't even get to see. Being able to go in the warehouse or go up to our archives, go into our archives and pull some of the ship's logs and command logs that come in all the time, just peruse them. Going into our armory. People don't realize the Navy has a well-rounded historical armory in Naval History and Heritage Command. The art, the amount of art we have is priceless. The stuff you see at the Pentagon, and some of these, and the admirals in the CNO's house, or in the CNO's office, and NICPON, Russ Smith, in his office. That's Naval History and Heritage Command's ownership. Over on the USS Olympia, that's part of Naval NAVSEA, inactive ships. Those guns are actually Navy History and Heritage guns that are still on there. But to see what we have and go to all the different museums around this country and see the variance in our history is just totally amazing. And being part and knowing that I was a part of that to protect it for future generations is just humbling. And when I tell fellow chiefs where I work, they're like, "Oh, you're where? Hey, can we stop by?" Sure, I'll take you in the back. My son loved it. He loved to be able to go in the back of the museums when I took him places and see what most people don't get to see. All the models that are up at the Naval Academy, the ship's models, and going into the back where they actually repair and make new models and seeing that history. It's tons of it. I would say that was some of the best things, is being part of that history.
I'll share one of mine too. So I mean, there's so many things you can choose from that have bits and pieces that are all awesome. I'll stick to the operational side. So my last deployment, which was as a senior chief a couple years ago, was with Naval Special Warfare Development Group. So that was if you all know who that's for, which I think you can figure out. We did some cool stuff. But it was also my first opportunity as a reservist. We were at sea for large portions of that. A lot of land incursions from sea, but we were at sea. So shipboard time, getting to do cool stuff. And I tell you, nothing's more of a motivator than seeing the results of your efforts, the fruits of your labor in real time. I think a lot of times as reservists, we get caught up on these support missions we do stateside, and we don't ever really get to see what that is going towards. And everything everyone's doing on the reserve is going towards something and has benefit and value. But nothing shows that more than go do a Navy SEAL deployment. But so from an operational standpoint, like I said, we blew a lot of stuff up in a really short time. So so that was pretty cool. From more of a leadership learning curve, one of the things that I'll share, and the Cole CMC kind of touched on it a little bit. So during that deployment, I was in the Red Sea when the Houthi rebels were firing off anti-ship cruise missiles. So there's nothing like being in a ship and hearing "come over the 1MC, brace for impact" out of nowhere at like 11:30 at night. So pretty ass puckering is how I would say it. And I learned a lot about myself in that type of situation, and I learned a lot about others in that situation. So overall, that was a badass deployment. Like I said, a lot of real value to what we did. And for me personally, I learned a lot about having to lead in situations where the shit is really hitting the fan. So anyone who's not more familiar with that incident, I can't get into detail about the ship I was on because it certainly wasn't in the news reports. But over the course of about 3 hours, we had 5 anti-ship cruise missiles fired from coastal batteries in Yemen, and to the point that we had 2 other destroyers, the Mason and the Nitsa, were also in the vicinity. And I mean, it was to the point that they were firing off decoys and SM-6 interceptor missiles. So it was 4 or 5 hours of craziness, right? And as an intel person, you know, we're in a little dark room on the ship, and you know, we had the whole brace for impact, but we have a special chat up, and it's a secret level chat, and we get everything from the CIC on those ships and everything. And you're just sitting in this dark room watching this chat come down, crazy chat. Like every 2 seconds, there's another chat thing in there, and it's the jabbering between the ships of what they're doing. So while I was in this little room, not even seeing what was going on outside, I could see what was going on via that chat. And like I said, there was a lot of shit going on. And we did have video after the fact. You know, we had one of those missiles was shot maybe 200 yards, you know, starboard side of our bow is where it was intercepted. So it was a hairy couple hours. And you know, I say that because, again, my previous comments from the CMC, the Cole, I don't think a lot of people are mentally prepared for that. We're back in that type of scenario now at sea. We are not uncontested in the seas, and it's just going to get worse as China's continue rise to prominence and their naval spending outpaces ours. So it is definitely something that you need to prepare for as a leader. Think through what you would do in those situations. And just realize that this is a reality that we face in today's Navy.
Master Chief, you said they were firing SM-6s?
Yeah.
So that is one of the programs that that's the primary program that I do work in on the production line at my civilian job.
Are you down at DMA or?
No, I'm actually at the missile factory where we're the final assembly of the missile.
Okay. But those are DMA programs, right? The Defense Missile Agency is who runs those programs, or?
Yeah, MDA, correct.
Okay, yeah.
There was a recent
so
one on
so
the.
There you go. There's an example of a fruit of your labor.
And, yes, and another example I have for that, just right before Thanksgiving, on the USS John Finn, they shot a SM-32A for the first intercept of a intercontinental ballistic missile.
Yeah,
That very missile, I actually built.
That's cool, and that's what I mean. It doesn't that amp you up to know that stuff that you personally worked on, you know, when you saw that result of what you put your effort into. So that's huge, and that does come back to recognizing sailors and everything else we do, right? Because again, we get in this funk that people are just doing stuff and they might not ever hear about the back end. This is especially true for us intel guys. You know, we do a lot of stuff that you think we would find out the results, but you know, you'd be surprised how much we don't learn happens 2 years later. There's stuff that I've worked on, totally forgot about, thought it was bullshit, and then I see something 3 years later on CNN about it. So it's, you know, I just caveat, you know, I could hear the excitement in your own voice telling me that story of how awesome it is to be, you know, involved in something and seeing that. So keep that in mind with your sailors, because again, whether it's that just passing comment about them doing a good job on something, you know, it's showing that you're paying attention and you're noticing what they're doing. And at the end of the day, we all want to feel like what we're doing is meaningful and not just busy work.
Thank you, Master Chief.
All right, let's get another selectee. Let us know who you are, where you at.
All right, guess I'm up next. Grateful I don't have to follow behind Lau tonight. You know, he always does such an excellent introduction. But I'm MAC Select Dixon. I'm from Birmingham, Alabama. That's where I currently am. I'll be attending drill with Kanzler in the morning. So, been in the Navy 13 years, all reserve the entire time. Out of those 13 years, I've spent about 5 years mobilized doing different stuff everywhere that I can. Let's see, wife, 3 kids, 14, 13, and 9. let's see. On the outside, I work for the Social Security Administration. I'm a benefits authorizer, so I crunch numbers all day, determine how much old people are going to get paid for Social Security. See, hobbies. I'm a car guy. I love muscle cars. That's what I do, when I get some free time. And for my actual question for the genuines, for those, I know Chief spoke on it earlier about transferring once you actually get selected, but for those that didn't, that had to manage that situation of now managing the individuals that were your peers a couple months ago, 3-4 months ago, how did you approach or handle that?
I can take this one. So I spent my first 3 years after selection in the same unit. I went from like LPO to I took over the chief spot, the leading chief spot, like a few months later. And I had to have a lot of those hard conversations with some of the salty people that didn't get selected and thought they should have, or some of them that I was closer friends with. And you just have to let them understand that, you're not trying to push them off. You're not trying to push them away, but you have to have a different relationship with them, and they have to understand it too. So as long as you're consistent with everybody, and you're not showing favoritism, which is one of the biggest things that can happen when you become that chief and all those junior sailors, you just got to keep level and make sure that they understand that, you have a new role, that, yes, you were friends and maybe you still talk to them outside of drill weekends, but they still need to understand that when you're in the uniform, when you're at the unit, when you're doing the Navy's work, you have to be that professional, and they have to as well.
All right. Thank you for that feedback, Senior.
Johnson, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself? You're muted.
Can you guys hear me?
There you go. Yep.
All right. CCC Select Johnson. I've had an interesting Navy career, right? So I've been in the Navy for 13 years. Joined back in 2007. Yeah. 13 years. Sorry. So first command was USS New York, plank owner, there for 5 years. Did the maiden voyage for that. I mean, my life is about that ship. I absolutely love that ship. The next ship I was on was the USS Ashland, deployed in, I actually went TAD/cross assigned. This is all active duty, by the way, to the USS Ashland, where we deployed to, this is 2010, we deployed to Haiti, right? So we were the first responders for that. Spent 96 days there, then we left. Then we were attacked by pirates in outside of Yemen. And then we actually prosecuted them. So we were the first people to ever capture. I mean, we blew one of them up, but we're the first people to ever capture pirates and bring them back for prosecution. And I still don't think that trial's over. I think the last time I saw an update, it was like last year. So it's still taken that long just to get these guys prosecuted through. So after that, I went out to the Office of Naval Intelligence out in DC. So that's where I did less EW work and more CT work. Nerdy intel stuff. It was really awesome. It was an NSA Joint Command, a lot of secret squirrel stuff that happened, and it's the closest thing to being locked into a closet somewhere, just doing the cool stuff that you'll never talk about. So that was great. I actually got out of active duty then. At the time, my wife was pregnant with our twins, and I had aspirations as a civilian. So I would switch to the reserves. I had my boys. Twin boys, they're 3 years old now. And first reserve command was NOS Washington, D.C. Stayed quiet for a year and a half. And then I actually mobilized last year with Joint Special Operations Command out in Afghanistan. And that was a very eventful year to be in Afghanistan. I actually left right after someone killed Soleimani. And then I've been on AAs and recovering ever since. It was eventful, got blown up with a VBIED. So there's been a lot of downtime and post-mobilization medical work, if you want to call it that. I have a newborn daughter. She was born 3 days before Chief results came out. So this Chief season has been, I don't know if you can see it in my eyes or not, but I'm running on coffee 24/7. So, yeah. So my question would be kind of based on a situation I'm in now, right? So I live in New York, Wading River, in Long Island. I drilled down to DC and I want a local assignment. So I actually requested my local assignment before. So the scenario I'm in is there's 2 billets that are available for local assignment. They're both SEL billets. So it kind of brought up this whole philosophy type thing of how does a first-year chief most successfully, I mean, the assumption is that a first-year chief gets these billets, but as a first-year chief, how do you most successfully handle a senior enlisted position?
I'll snag that one because I got a good one on this. So, quick context. When I made chief, I was on orders. I had never really had a chief up to the point I made chief, just the way my unit assignments had worked out. The first chief that I had was my sponsor. The month after chief season, I was at drill. My skipper called me into his office. He told me he just fired our unit cell, and I'm the new cell. Oh, and by the way, that unit cell was my sponsor for the season. So, I got a little bit of understanding of how that kind of works out. So, again, generally speaking, I would say it doesn't happen often as a first-year chief. You would maybe be a cell. The expectation is that comes a little bit later, but it certainly happens. A big question would be, are there other chiefs already in the unit? Because you're going to have that to deal with, just like anyone else. There's going to be some interesting personal dynamics there if you're coming in as a first-year chief and boom, you're the cell, and these guys have been in the unit for a few years. So you're going to have that dynamic to deal with. And you're just going to also be woefully unprepared. I can tell you in hindsight, I thought it was the coolest thing. Oh yeah, all right, I'll the cell right out the gate. Dude, it sucked, right? I was not prepared for that. The only thing that helped me, I feel like I leaned on a lot, was the fact that I was still on orders as well. So I was chiefing every day versus just kind of chiefing on the weekends and in between. So I had access to an awful lot of active duty folks that gave me guidance. And the reality is that would be no different for a first year chief. You gotta lean on the mess. They're there to work you through it. As you run into problems and issues, you need to talk to people. And just like any group of people, you're gonna connect with some people more than you're gonna connect with others. There's guys in the mess that you're just gonna be like, fuck that dude, like I don't like him, I'm gonna talk to him, right? And there's gonna be other people that you really connect with. So find that mentor early on is kind of what I always say for any first year chief, right? If there's someone that you found you connected with through the season, or you have someone before the season, ask them like, hey, do you mind if I lean on you as kind of my mentor? Having 1 or 2 people kind of in your ball pin that you have a really good relationship with and you're comfortable with asking dumb questions to. I mean, granted, everyone asks dumb questions, but some people are more gracious about answering them than others, right? Some people will give you shit when they shouldn't, when you're legitimately reaching out for help. So that's why I say when you're looking for a mentor, find someone that you can ask those dumb questions to, where you're not embarrassed to ask anything you want to ask, and be able to understand you're going to get legitimate, honest answers back. And honestly, that's not going to be every person in your mess. It's definitely not. So that would be kind of my primary guidance, is just understanding that you're going to find yourself in those situations, find some good mentors, and realize you gotta lean on the mess. I mean, that's the only way to do it, because if you go at it alone, you were going to fail miserably. So, and like I said, I was lucky enough to have a good core of people that first year, really that first 2 years I was in that cell position, because I really didn't understand it all.
So this is Chief Bear. I can echo some of this. I became a cell shortly after I put on chief, and it just so happened to be a cell where there was no mess. I was by myself in a unit of 33 enlisted, and I had to rely greatly on mentors I had from the past, some of which are still here today, like Keith Houston and Josh Mangum. And then I also made sure, because I was part of the IDC community, to use the chiefs within that mess as well. They had a fountain of knowledge. A couple things I learned being a cell. The first thing you want to do, make sure to have a sit down with your CO, get his expectations and policies, find out what his priorities are, because that's what you want to relay down to the troops. If the CO says, hey, Chief, my priorities are all sailors get paid and have berthing every drill weekend, you know what your priorities are. Another thing that took me a little bit longer to understand, but I finally realized the power, learn who your OSO is, your operational support officer. They are in control of your unit billets. If you need to do a true exchange, or you need to move one sailor out of a billet to place a local sailor into it, cross-assigned, in and out, OSO is your friend. And usually, most OSOs are former chiefs, so they understand what's going on. They may have civilian titles like sir or ma'am, but they usually know what's going on. They could definitely help you with the billets and managing the RUAD, which the RUAD, that's going to be your life coming up as chiefs. It's all about managing your manpower, making sure you know who fits in what billet, who's coming up, things like PRDs and who's cross-assigned in and out, evals, all those kind of things. The RUAD's going to help you out. If you don't already have it, highly recommend you right now go out and get a Navy NRUM account, Navy Reserve Unit Management. You're all eligible. It'll give you access to the RUAD, and you could go from there.
All right, thank you.
All right, I'll wrap it up here. Master at Arms Chief Select Timothy Burns. I'm actually out of New York, Nassau Island. I'd like to also say that my birth certificate for the service was the United States Army. Came in 1992, did 4 years active duty, stationed at 1st Infantry Division in Kansas, went over to 2nd ID in Korea, spent time there close to the DMZ, and then finished out my time with the 10th Mountain Division up in New York. I was a heavy equipment transport operator, did a lot of tank driving, tank transporting, and just drove pretty much everything that the Army had to offer. And then I decided I had a nice break in service as well. I decided that the Navy actually reached out to me, which was odd when I first saw it, but I took them up on the offer and came into the Navy in 2008. Came right into a subgroup where I'm still currently assigned. And it's interesting to hear from the chiefs here about how one should try to branch out and move on when they pick up rank and things like that. But I can attest to the fact that a majority of people that have been in my unit have stayed there and have reached the levels of Master Chief, which is, I guess, counterintuitive to what you were saying, Chief. But maybe you can shed some light on that as I finish this up. But been with the subgroup since then. Picked up a few NECs along the way. Did a deployment to Isa, Bahrain in 2016. We were the first Sec 4 detachment to take that over from the Army National Guard out of North Carolina, and the Navy still has that operation. So that was very interesting. And I live out here in Sound Beach, not actually far from one of my selects there, Johnson. And I have two beautiful daughters, a 5-year-old and 8-year-old, two little redheads, Sophia and Juliana, and married to a beautiful wife, Kasia, who's originally from Poland. So, and I work for, I'm a police officer also on the outside, civilian career with New York State Department of Animal Conservation with the Ranger Division. Do a lot of the law enforcement on public land, search and rescue, wildfire suppression, incident management, things of that sort. So So my question for the mess here is kind of twofold. One, to just kind of address that issue about sort of planting yourself in a command and growing there, as opposed to moving on. And the other question is, how did you find the issue with delegation? Was that difficult? Or was that an easy thing to let go and push on other people, or what?
So this is Matt Chief again. I got a brief comment on the first thing. So branching out versus not, I mean, it's totally possible to go from E1 to E9 and stay in the same unit. It's a big unit and you're continuing to get diversity of assignment. You know, you're training LPO, then you're the career counselor, then you're the unit LPO. You're bouncing around, you know, you can easily get promoted in the same unit. So I don't see that being promoted the same as the complete necessity to move around. Doesn't have to do with getting promoted. It has to do with gaining additional perspective, familiarizing yourself with other warfare areas within the Navy, and not being so centric with a specific command. And I'm a big proponent of moving around for exactly that reason, primarily for the additional perspective, learning areas that you might not have initially been in to begin with, and to a certain degree, stepping outside of your comfort zone to learn something new. It just rounds you out, I think, as a sailor and as a person, and is really the incentive that I say to move around, not necessarily just for promotion.
Yeah, thank you.
For delegation, that, you know, we all have this mentality that if we want it done right, we do it ourselves. I know that's a common theme, but when you're in whether it's in a unit where you're the only chief, or you're in a unit with multiple chiefs and, you know, maybe even multiple LPOs if you have different divisions, you have to delegate, because if you try to do everything yourself, you're gonna fail. So you have to learn very quickly, and hopefully during this process you learn some delegation, because you're being slammed with projects, right? You can't possibly do them all, to say nothing of doing them all right. So you have to learn to delegate some of those tasks out, and that's one of the things we're trying to teach you during this season. Hopefully you pick up on that, because that's going to become a big skill set when you get to either your own unit or when you get to a mess, and you have a responsibility, be it command career counselor or, you know, whatever the job may entail. You got to learn how to delegate.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Hey, you know what? I want to add something in here. I'm Senior Chief Steve Decord. I'm actually retired. I retired in 1991 on disability after 12 years. I actually made chief in 1987, so I've been a chief for 33 years. And actually, Chief Select Dixon, be careful when you use the old people thing when you talk about Social Security, bro, because we're still in the mess, man. We're still in the mess and we're still active. I'm joking around with you, though, man. It's all good. But one thing I want to talk about is with the delegation real quick. I made chief pretty young. I was 26 when I made chief. And what I learned early on, I read a lot of, like, I was a recruiter before I made chief. Like, I did a tour of 3 years of recruiting duty, and I started to get involved with seminars like Tony Robbins and all those success seminars back in the day. And they talked about delegation a lot. And they said that, you know, like the 1 Minute Manager and all those courses. And they said that delegation is important. So when I went back to the ship as an LPO, I had a couple first classes that were there, and then I got promoted to chief, like within like a month of that. And after I got promoted to chief, I was also the command career counselor, as you know, Chief Bear pointed out. So I had that as a collateral duty, and I actually, quite frankly, I enjoyed that. I was an OS, operations specialist. So what I discovered, though, is that I started to develop my first classes, the second class, the third classes. And then all of a sudden, they started to get promoted. And the interesting thing is my evaluations reflected that. So I actually got promoted quicker. You know, I made senior chief when I was 29. I made chief first time up, senior chief the first time up. Then unfortunately, I got a disability and I rolled out. But the thing is that as a chief, my first classes, the LPOs, they really didn't want me around that much. Okay, they wanted to make chief themselves. They wanted to, you know, shine and get their get the bullets on their evaluation and all. So what I would do is I would allow them the authority to make different decisions, to do things, and to just keep me informed. And then I would go up there and I would inspect certain things, make sure everything was going well. But I trusted them. But the other thing is not just trusting, I developed them. And then to give an example, like one bullet on my evaluation, I'm not saying this to impress anybody, was that when I left, when I transferred out of that particular command, was 8 of 8 OSs tested perfect, had perfect scores on the Harpoon certification. And it was literally because of training programs. So I think if you have a solid training program in place and you're developing your first classes, second class, third classes, delegation is never a problem because you have to trust that. Because for you to get promoted, for you to be able to move on, you have to, train your replacements, just like we are now as a Chiefs mess, training the replacements. And some of us old guys are still around, doing these type of things. So that's something. And even when I made senior chief and I transferred to a different command, my chief, I had a chief that reported to me and first classes as well. That chief wanted to make senior chief. He didn't want me in his business. I just happened to be the command career counselor again, right? So he basically came to me one day. He's like, "Senior, could you do me a favor?" Because I was in his business a bit, and he's like, I've been doing this, and it was funny because he was older than me too, and I was the senior chief. I was 29. And I think he was like almost like 38 or something. So there was a little bit of friction there, and that's just a challenge that comes up. But he said, "Senior, I've been running this division for 3 years now. I don't know that I need you here, telling me things or everything." And I respected that. I was new there, so I wanted to make sure things were going okay. But then I kind of backed off a little bit. I let him take charge, and I was able to do the command career counselor. Now, granted, remember, this is back when you had a 600 ship Navy, and you had, you guys today are so, manned so thinly that I think you wouldn't be able, I think it's a little bit more challenging. Where with me, I had, I had enough people to be able to do this and to be able to delegate, and also to step out and do the command career counselor thing probably like 80% of the time. So today I think it's different. I'm not on active duty today. I really don't, understand it, but I think that might be a challenge. But I would definitely, I wouldn't shy away from delegating. I would delegate, but like back in my day, we used to say it was called trust but verify. So trust the people that they're going to take care of it. Just go in there and just check in things, kind of check with your people too. Check with the E5s, E4, ask them how are things going? How you feeling today? All that kind of stuff. Stay plugged in, but just don't step on, the first class's toes.
Okay. Thank you.
You just remember that when, especially now, with having to check and verify, you're developing on what, and let them know, by setting that I'm going to check, they realize, and you got to hold them to their feet to the fire if they fail to either one, keep you informed, or two, follow through with what you've assigned them to do and giving them the authority. Right? You still have the responsibility, and that's where sometimes I think some of the younger chiefs that haven't done that for a little bit get into trouble. You'll give them something to do, but then you do follow up, and you're like, "Well, he did it. Well, did you check him?" Because that senior chief or master chief comes back to you and goes, "Yo, brother, where's your stuff?" All right, you got to make sure. And when you get them to understand that at any time you're going to come check on them, because that's what happened when I took over as the SCL as a new chief, and I taught them that stuff because I had great chiefs before me, because I came out of Willow Grove that hammered us in that way, that they knew that if, hey, chief's coming around, we better have this for him. Because when I give you a time and I need you to get this done, that's when I expect it. That like the coffee cup and the saying is, results not excuses. I literally had to fire an LPO and assign a new LPO because he wouldn't do his job. And then all of a sudden he disappeared on us because he went and got orders, AT orders, and never went through the command for it. He backdoored all of us, including the OIC. So.
Yeah, and I would also finish up with saying you got to build in time for that failure. At the end of the day, you're delegating, you're still responsible for things. So the buck still stops with you. So if we need to let our subordinates have the time to learn how to do things, and they're going to fail along the way, hey, it's great. They hit your deadline. It's exactly what you want. You're ahead of the curve. But you have to plan for the fact that likely what's going to happen is it's not going to quite be the way you want it to be. And it's certainly not going to be what you would be proud to turn into your commanding officer for. So when you're setting those deadlines, you got to build in time for you to ultimately fix what's wrong, right? Depending on the times, sometimes you have enough time to go back and forth on chops of things 2-3 times, send it back, let it come back. But there's other times you don't have that luxury. And, my prime example for that is evals, right? It's ridiculous, how many times I get evals from first classes, and I can't believe that's what a first class turned in. And then when I sit down and talk to them, the reason is they never were taught how to write an eval. Why? Because they had some chief who was just trying to get it done and steamrolled it, wrote them great evals, because that's why they're chiefs now. But, writing these evals, and they're just turning them in, and they're not having that back and forth. They're not giving that opportunity for that, second class to help the third class. And the first classes should be working with the E5s for their first drafts. You got to let them do that and not just get in there. So evals are a fantastic opportunity of how you need to build time in for failure. Because at the end of the day, when you turn those evals in, that's essentially you saying that you did that chop, and here you go, skipper. And if it's horrible, it's going to look like you were the one that didn't do what you were supposed to do, and not everybody else. And again, no excuses, right? The buck stops with you. So make sure that you're taking that into account with anything that you're delegating.
That was a huge one I did to my first classes. That was, all right, I want you to write up your eval, and then I want you to get it to me. And oh, by the way, you need to do your second classes and get the second classes to do their third class and E3s and below. Give them time. And then when they came back, because I know they gave me some junk, and I asked them, would you submit this as your eval? Would you want this going in? When you throw that at them, so like, yeah, okay, I'll take it back to you. But I also provided them examples of my past evals and especially the eval book. The eval writing book is a huge one to have handy, for them. Other assignments, making sure other PODs, POMs, all those other reports we got to do.
So you're going to find you're going to find
there's going to be hot burner stuff that way, by giving them that chance to learn early, when you get that hot burner, you throw them at them, you have confidence, and they have confidence to do it.
You're going to find as chiefs, especially in the reserve world, you're administratively heavy. I'm a yeoman. I've seen 10,000 evals in my career, easily 10,000. Okay, it is administratively heavy, the burden. I talked earlier about how it doesn't really matter if you're a boatswain's mate or a corpsman or whatever. All chiefs are yeomen. Some of us get a head start. It just is what it is. But you're going to have to write awards. You're going to have to write letters of recommendation, letters of discipline, performance evaluations. Okay. There is a course out of New Orleans. It's called Reserve Senior Enlisted Management. They're doing it online now, but it is 2 weeks. It is taught by chiefs for chiefs. Okay, Reserve Senior Enlisted Management. And they really help the new chiefs learn how to effectively manage the programs so that you are able to walk in lockstep with your JOs and teach them what they need to know to be effective leaders, okay, and be able to help your skipper out to achieve the mission, okay. This is not unit funded. Big Navy Reserve will pay for it. Find yourself a seat, do it virtually. You can even go as a frock chief, but get your feet wet. And it's another great place to network with other chiefs from all over the country who may have been there, done that. And you'll find people that made chief yesterday and people that have been a chief for 5 or 8 years finally going to this course. Cannot emphasize it to help learn time management and back planning. For those that know BAMSIS, it is the way to, like evals. The Master Chief used evals as an example. That's a 3-month process, especially in the reserve world.
Just remember also, as a chief in the
Oh.
reserve side, the drill weekend may have ended, but our work doesn't.
No, I work every day for my unit. Every single day I do something for
There
my
was something.
unit.
I went on when Willow Grove was closing.
Mm-hmm.
I got orders to NATO for a month in Lisbon and Rhoda, but I still had to take the time while overseas and find billets and new homes for all my sailors because we're closing our debt for
Yep.
that, and had to find them new homes to go to. You're the chief, and you got to. I mean, we just had to do it. I made
Kind
sure
of like now
everyone
during,
had a home to go to.
it's kind of like now during season, you're doing a little bit of something every day. It may not be quite this intense. You may be able to go 2 or 3 days between doing stuff, but you're always quality checking your sailors, their workload to push up, because it's a balance, right? It's that three-legged stool. You have your civilian employer, you have your family, and then you have the Navy Reserve. You need to find that balance in your life to make sure that no one of those legs of the stool is getting longer or shorter than the others. That is a difficult balance, especially for a new chief. You're going to struggle, I promise you. You're going to want to go at this balls to the wall and make things happen. But remember to find time for your family. I know during season now, a lot of you are spending a significant amount of time away from your family and significant others. When this is done, you take a pause for a moment. You get back to mom and the kids. And then go balls at it.
This Chief Bailey. We've hit our mark. Knowledge, a lot of experiences. Selectees, feel free to reach out to any of the genuines who have given you any type of charge and wisdom this evening on a sidebar to make sure you have plenty tools for your toolbox. But at this time, that concludes this evening of the Big J events. So selectees, by all means, you are relinquished of your charge book duties at this time, and you can take forth in whatever other tasks that you have that you need to complete. I appreciate everyone this evening, and I look forward to seeing you all tomorrow.